So joining me now is my friend and good friend of the show, Michelle Sterling from Friends of Science. And there's so much to talk about on the climate front because now that COVID has receded, we've gone back to the old emergency that's going to kill us all, and that's climate change. Michelle, thanks so much for coming on the show. I wanted to talk to you before we get into some other things about you had sort of made a list of things that you wanted to talk about, but there were some things that I wanted to talk about too. But I noticed this week, and the reason I sort of mentioned COVID is because there's a woman now suing CBC and several levels of government and officers of government because of the propaganda that she fell victim to with COVID. And she ended up with Bell's palsy and severe vaccine injury. And so there are attempts to hold CBC and the government responsible for their bad, flawed messaging there, or at least their messaging that wasn't entirely honest. And I see that you've done a little bit of deconstructing CBC's, what would we call misinformation on another front, and that's climate change. So, and I watched this as you did it. It was a live show deconstructing CBC's propaganda.
Mm-hmm. Yes. The deconstructing CBC's propaganda. This was about the fault lines report, which also contained a lot of COVID material as well. And basically the fault lines report was set up by the Canadian Council of Academics or something to that effect, or Canadian Council of Academies. Anyway, a multi-million-dollar organization, basically government funded. And we were the only group picked out by name in it. But, when you go through the CBC report, you see that they're trying a new method of indoctrination and propaganda, which is, telling a story narrative. So, in a way, I feel bad for Jayla Bernstein because, the live stream that we did really takes her to task because, she was not reporting on the story. Instead, she was creating this kind of narrative, storyline narrative to draw people in. And then they put Stephen Lewandowski on screen, and he's a professor of cognitive behavioral psychology. He's the guy who wrote the very famous paper called NASA Faked the Moon Landing, which then he tried to apply to all dissenting climate scientists that they're all conspiracy theorists. So this may be starting to sound a bit familiar to everyone. Anyway, he said almost nothing, but in his interview, and really the fault lines report that Jayla did was not reporting at all. So within that live stream, I did sort of like, what if she had been reporting on actual things in the report? So, have a look at it and see what you think. But yeah, CBC is, not informing the public. They're actively misinforming the public on so many things.
Now, one of the things that I think should have been all over mainstream media, it happened in May, and I didn't see it anywhere except on the Friends of Science YouTube channel. And that was that wind power in Alberta went to near zero. And this was chilling to me because of the federal push for net zero policies. They don't want even fossil fuel backup when it comes to green energy on the grid. And I didn't see this reported anywhere, that there was a complete and total collapse of wind energy in Alberta in late May, except at Friends of Science. Tell us what that would have meant for us. First of all, tell us what happened and what that would have meant for us if there were no such thing as fossil fuel backup for our grid.
Well, it's actually, there was one media report, and that was Brian Zinchuk of Pipeline Online. So he did the first report of it, and then I picked it up and basically read his report as a video message because, it reaches more people and some people don't read. Anyhow, wind collapsed and for many hours. I don't have the stats off the top of my head. But what it would mean for us is if we didn't have the natural gas backup, which we do have, and we're building a couple of thousand megawatt more gas generation, and if we didn't have the existing coal, which we do have, if we didn't have the import from Saskatchewan, Montana, and BC, we would have been toast. And the thing is with wind, wind and solar are typically regional phenomenon. So if there's a drop in wind in Alberta, that would be the same in Saskatchewan. And Saskatchewan is also under tremendous pressure to abandon coal and not use any natural gas and to implement a whole bunch of wind. And of course, the theory of the clean grid, which the east-west grid, which is a Liberal platform, has been for a long time. It's based on probably on the Danny Harvey paper out of University of Toronto, where he proposed, and note, he's a geographer, he's not a power generation expert, and you can tell when you read the paper, because he thinks that an east-west grid hooking up to hydro in the provinces with lots of hydro and nuclear in Ontario and wind, mostly like 30% of the wind power, I think, was to come from Alberta, that we would have a very cheap, inexpensive power source. And you're hearing this being repeated by the Clean Energy Canada, the Tides offshoot, by the Climate Institute. And their argument is like, oh, there's so many billions of dollars on the table for the provinces to be subsidized for this. You should just jump in and then you'll have cheap power. Well, all those billions of dollars of subsidies come from our pockets. So we'll be paying for these subsidies.
Oh, hey, what you just saw there is a clip from my weekly full-length show, The Gun Show. It airs on Wednesday, but this is the internet. You can watch it whenever you feel like. You just have to become a subscriber to our paywalled premium content. Just go to rebelnewsplus.com to become a member today.